I'm standing in 25-mile-an-hour winds trying to patch a hole in my roof before the rain comes on Tuesday. My name's Nicholas, and I live aboard a 103-year-old historic wooden boat, Argonaut II, and I'm on a mission to build community around this boat to help out with an ongoing restoration and preservation of its history. Today we're going to get into an accidental boat project that started as something really small and is turning into me doing a temporary patchwork on about half of the roof of my pilot house. The problem I'm trying to solve is that there's a leak in the back of my chart room, and more recently the whole bunch of water came down onto my keyboard and actually destroyed my keyboard and forcing me to an external one. Now, it's pretty common for wooden boats to have leaks. You can talk to almost anyone who owns one that can describe a leaky ceiling, leaky topsides, and in the case of Argonaut, everything you see here is about 100 years old, and so the wood, the corking in between it, is starting to fail. In this episode, I'm working on chasing these leaks and hopefully tightening this up for the rainy season to come. Before we get started, I'd love to share with you some of the evenings I've enjoyed with some charters over the past couple weeks. And I'd like to take the time to thank you for your patience with me in getting these videos out. Charters have become so much fun, but also very overwhelming, and have taken me away from being able to put these videos together, but they are helping to support the ongoing restoration of this boat, and I hope to do some catching up on video editing in the next few weeks. I first got myself into this mess because I was trying to put a waterproofing solution down on the deck just to prevent the existing leaks as a short-term solution before I attacked something bigger in the future. My intention was to put some Kiwi Grip deck coating down on the top of the roof, which I've been using as a waterproofing solution for my decks, and was going to apply a coat or two on my roof to see if it would stop the leaks. But when I started poking around, I noticed that some of the canvas was actually lifting up in the area where some of the leaks were coming through. It was right at this moment where I realized that this project was turning into something a lot bigger than I was anticipating, feeling the dampness of the wood and the extent of the moisture that was getting in beneath the canvas. I'm not quite sure how old the canvas is itself. It has a layer of tan paint on it, and then you can see another 3 coats of a gray deck sealant paint, followed by a black coat and then a white coat. I need to make a decision as to whether or not I do a scrappy quick fix job that might only last a couple years, or to see if I can swing a proper repair here at anchor. All the decision making has a lot of pros and cons, and you're always deciding between doing it the best and right way and what you can either do with your own skill set. Obviously, if I had a blank check budget, I would love to pour resources into saving this boat fully and do it all at once. But this is a slow chipping away kind of project, and as I prepare for the massive haul out in the fall, I can't necessarily be spending all my time and resources on other maintenance projects that are not necessarily at the top of the list. Kind of terrifying to rip off something that is doing some water protection for you without really having a fully laid out plan on fixing it. But the next 2 weeks are going to be sunny, and I'm hoping that I can get a solution down before the next rain, and trying to do so in between boat charters. After a busy week of charters, I made my way back north into Canada to connect up with my friends Leo and Mart aboard Tally-Ho, and to see them off as they embark on a long journey south down the Pacific coastline to Mexico as they slowly make their way to England. So it's a few days later since I ripped open a giant hole on the roof of the house. I had 3 different charters, and I just want to say how much I appreciate everyone's contribution towards the project this fall, which is starting to ramp up, and I continue to make new projects that are unexpected, but I think necessary. I'm actually up here with my friends Leo, Mart, and Will. Just over that way, you can see their mast. Had them up on the roof consulting.
You can get a tarp. I think a tarp is
just a tarp.
Sort of like
yeah,
EP,
so at least it rolls off.
I'm trying to see the side of the plank. Well, this is the side to maybe look at. Oh,
right now I'm thinking about just digging out as much rod as possible, filling it in with epoxy, and then putting fiberglass over the top. So this is looks like the biggest culprit. This is rotted all the way through. So the next thing I'm thinking about is trying to remove all these old fixtures which were historically part of the old antenna and radar. The older radar has since been removed and replaced with this Ray Marine. Here we are in the chart room, and right here is the exhaust vent for the old wood stove that used to sit right here before this bench was put in. And then we have all the fixtures for the old radar and radio antenna. Just put a skylight into the chart room. As the next step, I decided to remove 2 of the most rotten planks, which I'll replace with a couple pieces of yellow cedar. Right here, I have the 2 planks all cleared out, and as a next step, I'm going to start sanding and prepping the surface for finish with the epoxy. Sometimes it's really fun to kind of dig into the history of the boat and different parts or changes that have happened over time. This plank that I'm replacing is a short piece. It's actually coming from a cutout that took place around 1940, where the Gardner engine on the boat replaced this big 3-cylinder Fairbanks Morse. How the church installed it was they cut a big hole in the deck under the chart room, and then again right here you can see this line here square matches the same cutout that takes place in the chart room. I'm here in the chart room, and you can see down here this deck planking is original 1922 Douglas fir. There's a cutout where the church installed the more modern 1940 Gardner diesel engine. So this line here mirrors what is up on the ceiling there. Down here in the engine room, there is a sistered frame forward and another sistered frame aft that the church used to support those replacement planks that you see on the floor in order to lower down the Gardner engine, which is the engine that we still use today. And it is along that fix where all the water was coming in, causing rot to the butts of the planks, and ultimately leading for me to have to do this repair. After a fun few days in Victoria, which was a mix of trying to work on the house, a few other boat projects, and having a couple nights out on the town, we just departed this morning, hoping we found a nice weather window. The wind has been blowing the last few days and is forecasted to continue to blow. Right now around Race Rocks, the weather station's reading 32-mile-an-hour winds, which is typically more than I'd like to go through. So we do have an option to bail before we get to the point. It is potentially one of those batten down the hatches kind of days. Going through the Juan de Fuca Strait, we try to time it so that the wind is actually going with the current. Ideally, we want both the wind and the current against us. That way the sea state is lower, even though it'll be a slower boat ride going into the current. I am going westbound through the Juan de Fuca Strait, and it's actually the furthest west of the strait that I've been. This strait can actually be the most dangerous portion of the entire northwest coast. The reason being, the entirety of Puget Sound and the Strait of Georgia, all the way up to Desolation Sound, drains and floods through this narrow strait every single day. That, with the combination of the mountains on Vancouver Island, the Olympic Range, funnels wind, typically a westerly, so there's a tendency for the sea state to build to really dangerous conditions when that wind is blowing against the tide. And so if you can see here on the anemometer, we're reading almost a 40 knot steady apparent wind, but the sea state is rather calm relative to the amount of wind that we're seeing, and that's because the wind and the tide are going the same direction. So it's blowing 20 miles an hour, gusting to 30 or 35, and it's not a really great day to do boat projects up on the roof of the house, but I only have a few more days until the rain comes, and so I'm trying to get as much done as I can. So today I'm going to finish clearing out this one rotting strake and then try to chase it with some penetrating epoxy just to mitigate the rot that there is right now, and hopefully that'll set me up to start laying epoxy and waterproofing the house with a temporary patch over the course of the weekend. So the next thing I'm going to do is take some penetrating epoxy and drill some 1/4 inch holes into different sections of the rot, putting this slowly in to allow it to seep into the rot and the wood grain. Following morning, and the wind has subsided a little bit after quite a windy night. My anemometer, it turns out, read gusts of 49 miles an hour, and it was a little spooky, but I'm in a great anchorage, and at it again today. 4 more days until forecasted rain. So what I did was I cleaned out the 2 rotting strakes that I'm replacing, and next I am going to put some penetrating epoxy to the butts of the strakes that are being left in place, and then I'll use the rest of it chasing little pieces of rot. I could probably go through several gallons of this stuff, and then next I'll be laying a thin coat of epoxy over everything before I chase after all the holes and gaps with some filler in order to fair everything flat prior to putting fiberglass over the top. Now that the penetrating epoxy is setting in, I'm going to let it start drying while I measure out the length and start fitting the strakes into the gaps of the rotting ones that I pulled out. Taking a break from the epoxy work and going for a quick run while the epoxy is setting and drying out. And I am on the coastal trail in East Souk Park, and just look how magical it is. Cliffs down to the beach, back into the woods, and the fog's rolling in from the strait and moving up into the park, and it's just kind of a magical place. I think I found my new favorite spot on Vancouver Island. Along the way, I ran into a restored trap shack that was built in the early 1930s, where watchmen would empty salmon traps that were set up and down the coast, and back when fishing was very good here in the little inlets along the coastline. It is day 3 of the project. I moved a boat about a 1/4 mile deeper into the bay just to get a little bit more protected from the wind. Today's goal is to use a fairing filler in the epoxy to try and fill in the big gaps and holes across the deck. And the other thing I'm going to do is fasten and epoxy the strakes into the gaps. These 3 holes are going directly into the chart room. I used the back of some cardboard, taped it down with packaging tape, and so that way any drips that come through I can just pull this away and be able to sand, prime, and paint the ceiling at a later date. As I waited for the epoxy to dry on the roof, I fashioned up a quick plug to use for the insert where I pulled the antenna out of the roof of the house. So you may ask why I'm doing such a hack job on this disc to patch in this hole. It does not have to be very precise. I'm just using it as filler to cut down the amount of epoxy I need to fill the hole, and it should plug up the hole just fine. So I made a mistake in my learning process, not realizing that this wood would float on the epoxy. And so in an effort to try and save it, I'm just sitting here waiting for it to kick off a little bit. And this is one of those learning moments that's such a part of wooden boat ownership and is what makes it fun. Day 4-ish on this project, and I have all the epoxy down. So a little bit of the epoxy coming through, but this can all be sanded down fairly easily. I am going to take a grinder to grind down the sharp edges around the perimeter, and then a sander to make everything as fair as possible prior to laying down the fiberglass. And as a last step, I am putting in about a 1/2 inch radius along the edges, just so the fiberglass can adhere more easily to the covering boards. So I have great news and bad news about the state of the epoxy. The great news is that it did rain the other night, and the boat actually stayed dry. There were no leaks. So I've successfully accomplished the waterproofing part. The bad news is that the 1/2-inch radius that I put around the edges of the roof sloughed out because I didn't put enough filling material. And so I'm gonna have to redo those prior to laying down the glass. I'm actually here filming at the Port Townsend Wooden Boat Festival. Since putting the last epoxy down, I said goodbye to Tally-Ho and made my way southbound to be able to make it here to the Port Townsend Wooden Boat Festival, where I've been meeting so many of you already. And next time, I'm gonna try to get a little bit more in-depth about charters. My friend Andrew comes back to visit. And if you are interested in having some time on the boat, I am opening up the boat for charters for another month or so. So please reach out on my website, which is linked in the description. And if you want to become part of this project, please consider contributing to the cause. I'll get back to you all in a few weeks about my plans for the haul out and what I'm hoping to accomplish this fall and into the winter season.